Hi, everybody, and welcome back to EdTech World from Wayside Publishing. Welcome to episode 3. My name is Meredith White, and my guest today is a man who needs no introduction when it comes to, I don't want to embarrass him, when it comes to technology in world language education, Joe Dale. I am outside of Atlanta, so I am in Metro Atlanta in the US. Joe, will you tell us where you are and what you're doing these days?
I will certainly. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity, Meredith. I love, catching up and having a proper conversation. So that's what this is all about. No editing, just a proper conversation about all things edtech and particularly AI. So right now, I'm in my study on the Isle of Wight in the UK. This morning, I was in Dublin, flying back after a cancelled flight last night, which was fun and games, and there was snow yesterday as well. That's why lots of flights were cancelled. So I jetted back from Dublin to the UK, to London, and was able to get back in time to do my keynote for B-Belt, which is the biggest event the British Council do in the Americas. It's the British Council of Mexico that do that. And I was able to hit my slot, do the keynote, and now I'm talking to the amazing Meredith White. So there we are. What can I say?
You've had a busy time. I know it's here on the weekend now, and there's been the same here of just kind of like go, go, go. The next thing. Okay, today's Thursday, today's Friday, and so yeah, traveling always makes everything more, to me, a little bit more logistically nerve-wracking. I have to be
Yeah, when
here.
things go wrong,
Hmm.
it's like and then having to deal with that there and then. But the reason I was in Dublin is because I've been doing a course to do with AI with some language teachers and some teachers from across the curriculum. So for those people that follow me on Twitter and various other places, everyone will probably know that I regularly go to Dublin. I've been doing this for the last couple of years now, but this week I did a brand new AI course, and all the experimentation and all the research I've been doing. I've tried to sort of put it together into a 4-day course, and we had a lot of fun. It was very practical, very hands-on, and I shared lots of my own prompts and lots of tips and tricks. It wasn't all about ChatGPT, although there was a big onus on ChatGPT and all the things that you can do with that, such as lesson planning and creating different types of text and different multiple choice questions and these sorts of things, and how you can have a dialogue with ChatGPT using your voice. And then we looked at other tools as well. One of my favorite tools at the moment is Perplexity. Do you know that one,
I've heard
Meredith?
the name, but I have not been on it or logged in or anything.
Yeah. So likewise, I'd heard of it for a while, but then I started playing with it, and I just think, wow, it's just great. So for those people that don't know, Perplexity is essentially a search engine, but it uses AI. So what it does is you do your search or ask a question, what have you, and then it searches the internet, and then it finds probably about 6 different sources which it can then reply to you about, and it essentially makes like a paragraph answer. So it's drawing using Gen AI. It's drawing from those sources, and it shows you what the sources are as well. So you can, for example, click on the YouTube clip that it's used, or click on the article, and I just think that's fantastic. And it means that the information that it gives you is absolutely up to date. Whereas one could argue with, well, certainly with 3.5 with ChatGPT, it's not been updated since I think 2021. So if you say, for example, who is the current monarch in the UK, it'll say the Queen. Whereas if you use ChatGPT 4, it will say King Charles III.
Right.
So it just shows you. Whereas with Perplexity, it's bang up to date. So it's using the AI, but it's also using the internet. So now I know with ChatGPT 4 you can use the internet, but it's not quite. I don't think as useful as things like well, with Padlet, for example. Padlet have introduced this new feature called Magic Padlet. Although I'm not actually sure if they're still calling it Magic Padlet. They called it Magic Padlet for like the first few weeks, and I heard about it through Tony Vincent. It might be you retweeting Tony Vincent's tweet. I can't remember, but I thought, oh, Magic Padlet. So I was then all over it, wrote about it in my Facebook group, Language Teaching with AI, quick plug. And but when I looked at it recently, as in a couple of days ago, they don't seem to be calling it Magic Padlet anymore, but it's basically doing the same thing. And so I just went into Perplexity and I said, could you describe how to use Magic Padlet? And it came up with, again, about 6 sources, some of which were from the Padlet blog, and then like a YouTube clip, etc. And it gave me a really nice paragraph on what it was. And then I said, can you write me a tutorial on how to use Magic Padlet? And it made me a tutorial. And it's so, from the point of view of being up to date, I just think it's wonderful. I mean, I think ChatGPT, etc., is also wonderful, but maybe not for that sort of internet searching, making a summary of something that's very, very up to date. So, I definitely recommend doing a deep dive in Perplexity. It's great.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. And like you said, with the sources is so important because a lot of these places, like using generative AI for things like that, like looking for information that you need for something, and then having it say, here's what that particular company or whatever, if it's Padlet or whoever it is, here's what they already have, is so nice because now, especially after a lot of us taught digitally a couple of years ago, for a prolonged time, certain platforms and certain websites are pushing out great how to's, just like demos, descriptions. I mean, before you could kind of muddle your way through how to use a new tool, but now they're like, here you go, and the marketing is really strong. And so to have those resources all in one place is awesome. Um, what are you, so when it comes to generative AI, not just kind of AI, right? We've had things be sort of artificial intelligence for a long time, but looking at the wave of generative AI, is there a way that you kind of explain to people what's going on right now? Because I could see people feeling overwhelmed. I've talked to people who have said, there are so many websites, there are so many applications, like there are so many things to keep up with, or they just think it's ChatGPT as one example. Is there a way that you kind of describe what's happening right now in terms of generative AI and all of the options and what they can do with it?
I think a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed,
Mhm.
me included, to be absolutely frank. But I think that what I tried to do at the beginning of face to face or online sessions is explain essentially how large language models work. So, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, as is, used to be Google Bard, Claude, etc., are all what are referred to as large language models. And that's a term that's been around since the 1950s, 1960s, along with natural language processing. This idea of essentially being able to communicate with the AI as if it's a human being, and the idea of the Turing test and the way in which if you can't discern if you're speaking to a human or to an AI, then one could argue, or he would argue, that you've then passed the Turing test. But I think if you explain, well, what I tend to do is I tend to say in lots of ways it's really just like a big database. So, which maybe sounds less sexy or what have you, or less cool, but really it's just doing lots of very strong, powerful mathematical computations, and really it's just like a database. So the idea that, I think, if you sort of explain it in a very sort of clear way, the way in which um, um, how AI works is that you have to feed into it this huge data set, be it text or images or audio or what have you. So in the case of ChatGPT, OpenAI, what they did was they just gathered all this publicly available content, officially known as scraping, which is a very horrible term, but anyway, scraping the internet to find public content without consent, I must say as well, and then fed it into ChatGPT, so that when you put your prompt in, it will then give you an answer um, based on the patterns it recognizes within the text which has been fed into it, which will have its natural human biases. And it can, as you know, it can hallucinate, it can produce inaccurate information. And I think, to begin with, certainly something I did, and lots of other people I think that are into this sort of thing have done as well, is just really had a big play with it and just worked out the sorts of things that large language models can do well and the sorts of things that they can't do as well. That's why, for example, when I was talking about perplexity a minute ago, I think it's very good at dealing with the issues of factual information. Whereas I think if you ask ChatGPT a factual question, probably it's more likely to hallucinate as opposed to saying, could you write me a text on a Spanish student having a disastrous weekend, for example? It's going to produce probably a really good, grammar-wise, a really good quality piece of text. Of course, it might have to be adapted a little bit for level and what have you, but off the bat, it can do a really good job. Whereas if you say for it something very simple, like um, like a mathematical question, if I had 4 apples and I ate 2 apples, how many apples would I have left? And probably it would get it wrong because it can't do those sorts even though, as I was saying earlier, it's all about mathematics and it's all about computational power. Actually, asking it to do simple questions to do with maths, it just falls down. It can't do it. It's not programmed in that way. So I think understanding how it works, the way in which essentially it's sort of guessing on probability what the next word is going to be, and not even the next word, the next sort of snippet of a word. It's all this idea around tokens that you generate different types of text by using X number of tokens. So some simple prompts will use fewer tokens, and other ones which are more complicated will produce many, many more. Now, this might sound a bit nebulous, a bit complicated in itself, but I'm trying to just explain how large language models work. And if you understand that, and understand that really a lot of these tools like Diffit and Twee are essentially just using the ChatGPT in the background, they're just using the sort of skin or interface, but really the same behaviors are happening in the background. That's why I think that what's clever about Perplexity is the way in which it's combining that Gen AI with a search engine. So, of course, with EdTech, but particularly with AI at the moment, if you feel overwhelmed, that's a completely fair reaction. And the rate of change that we're seeing in the last year is faster than I've ever seen before. And that's because there are so many companies who are trying to win races in different sections and areas, trying to be the best tool for text to image AI generation, or the best tool for search engine generation, or the best large language model, etc. And really, what I found has worked best is working out according to the job you have to do, and that's to do with when we talk about choosing the right tool for the right job, it's the same thing really, but working out what's the best AI tool based on what it is that you're trying to do. So, for example, I mean, I mentioned Claude earlier. Claude AI is probably one that people are not as familiar with, but actually it's really, really good in the sense that compared to the free version of ChatGPT, you can put in a lot more text compared to as opposed to 3.5 with ChatGPT. And so by doing that, you can, for example, put in a transcript. So you could go to YouTube, you could click on the more option in the description to get the transcript, which people may not know that they can do that. You then get the transcript. It's not always available. There's not always a transcript, but most of the time there is, in whichever language you want. And then with that transcript, you can put that into Claude, for example, and just say, could you make me a bulleted summary of this? Or I've done this live in webinars. I've taken a transcript from Little Red Riding Hood in French, and then I've used a Chrome extension voice control for ChatGPT, and I've then say, okay, I want to have a conversation with the wolf. I want you to play the role of the wolf, and I'm going to play the role of Little Red Riding Hood, and we're going to have a chat in French, which is just great fun, great, and just from the transcript, you can do that. So I do hear it when people saying that they feeling overwhelmed, and I think a lot of that really is around raising awareness amongst teachers on what you can do. And there's so many people like yourself, like myself, like Maureen Lamb, people like that, who are sort of going out their way trying to share ideas to demystify this whole AI revolution that we're seeing at the moment. But also, I think having PDs in schools, or having sessions where people can ask questions, can have a play. That's incredibly important because this is not going away, and schools really need to, one, have an AI policy in place if they haven't done already, and two, train the staff on how they can best use AI, because if they just expect it to be done through osmosis, which has been the case, well, certainly in the pandemic, I would imagine that there were lots of staff that just felt they just had to sort of pick it up themselves, really. And I think having that sort of PD in place is really, really important because I think it's very exciting. I think it's really exciting on what we're seeing. There are risks, there are dangers, but I think from the point of view of genuinely reducing workload for teachers, I think if they know how it can be used and how you can really take advantage of it, I think there's a lot to be gained from upskilling on the use of AI.
I agree. And I appreciate your use of the word demystify there, because I think that's exactly what it is when you're showing somebody a site or a function or a way to explore one of these, you can see them go, oh gosh, I didn't know it did that. Or, oh neat, let me try, and you're kind of, yeah, absolutely demystifying it and taking some of that mystery away, but also that fear, which I think is big. You've mentioned some really great examples of generative AI in the hands of the teacher, which I think is great because I know a lot of people I work with and a lot of the conversations I have, um, the fear and that feeling of not knowing and that feeling of concern and or just maybe outrage, right? Like there are some people who are just like, and here we go, right? Another thing, or, that kind of thing, which I also totally understand, is because they're immediately thinking of it in the hands of the students, or that might be their first exposure to it is, you know, um, oh, a student used this to create something or whatever. But I think world language has kind of a unique position in that we're totally used to that. We're already used to,
Absolutely,
so many
absolutely.
like translation tools and, all these different like dictionaries and word. We're already used to kind of that figuring out if a student used something external for a writing or for like, are you sure, Joe? This doesn't sound like you. I don't think you know these words, in week 3 of French 1, right? Or like Spanish 1. Like, are we sure? Habría dicho? Really? Okay. I don't think those are things, but then having that conversation. So I see a lot of fear and frustration, both from colleagues, especially in other content areas. I don't really see it from other world language colleagues, which is interesting because we kind of are like, yeah, well, another one, kind of a thing. We're used to it, but other content areas really aren't. And that was something I hadn't thought about until some of the artificial intelligence, like the math platforms where the student can just hover their phone and it sees the math problem and it senses it and then it computes it and shows the work. What an amazing tool. I think of my experience as a student who wasn't particularly strong or weak in math. I was kind of indifferent to it and I would work hard but it just wasn't, my favorite. And to have some help outside of class, to have a tool that would show me some of those processes would have been amazing instead of just flipping to the back of the textbook because the answers were there and it just said the answer is 9, or 9x, and you're like, how did that even get to that? I would have loved some of that assistance, but it's kind of like chips or crackers or who can have just one, right? So it's like, there's no way that you're like, oh, thanks, that was just for extra help, yay technology. Students are like, oh, this is amazing, I'm going to do the whole thing, I'm going to do my entire homework with this, or I'm just going to get the answers and maybe not use it really with curiosity in mind. So I understand, I understand where people are coming from, but I love hearing the uses of generative AI in the teacher's hands, like you said, to reduce the workload a little bit and to have kind of like a little personal assistant that you can say, listen, I'm creatively stumped right now. I have this great authentic resource or this great video. I cannot come up with anything else to do with it. I'm exhausted. Please generate, some questions, or like you said, talk in the voice of one of the characters or a famous character if we're looking at a um cultural topic, or I mean just the list goes on. What are some of your favorite current uses, I guess, in the teacher's hands or in the student's hands for generative AI, in addition to the ones you've mentioned, which are great, um, for world language teachers? Like, what are some even maybe hidden or clever uses that people might not automatically see, like changing the tone or simplifying a text that you've seen that are specifically powerful for world language?
Yeah. So one of the questions that's coming up a lot, I've been noticing in my Facebook group, in other places, is how can we use AI for conversation practice for the students? And that is, clearly, a good idea potentially for promoting their autonomy, for giving them practice in a sort of in a risk-free, if you like, environment. And as we know with EdTech in general, that it can allay students' fears, and they can feel as if they're not talking to a human being; they're talking to a bot, and therefore they can feel that they can take some risks. They don't feel embarrassed. They might be a bit shy, etc., and they can give things a go. And I think that one of the tools which I'm really excited about at the moment, and I've seen lots of people saying nice things about it, is Mizu, because it's set up to be used educationally. It's FERPA, COPPA, and GDPR compliant. They are saying on their website that they're not going to sell student data. I've actually had a few direct message chats with the Twitter account, and they've been, or X account, should I say, and they've been really forthcoming and really good. And it was completely free for quite a long time. When I say quite a long time in the world of AI, that probably means a couple of weeks. But anyway,
20
and
minutes.
then they introduced the premium tier, which is what lots of tools are doing, like Diffit and Twee, etc., which is absolutely fair enough, because if people don't realize, every time you use one of these tokens I was talking about earlier, you have to pay for that. So if you had it completely free, unless you're a massive company like Google or Microsoft, then you'd go out of business. So companies probably at the moment, what they're doing is that the independent companies, is they're running it completely free and then introducing a premium tier once they see enough people, once the community has been built up enough for them to make it worthwhile and economically feasible. So I've been really impressed by Mizu so far. And essentially what it allows you to do, it allows you to create your own chatbot. And you'll notice if you go to the Mizu website, that if you go to the explore section, that there are chatbots for every subject, I would say, and lots of different use cases. So just as a starting point, just have a look under Explore and just see what there is there for world languages. But literally in about 5 minutes, I made a chatbot as a waiter, a French waiter in a French cafe, and I was able to put in some simple instructions, simple learning objectives. And then there's two ways of creating your chatbot. There's the custom version and there's the AI generated version. I would recommend looking at the AI generated version, and it's really, really simple. So you just write your learning objectives in, and then you click the generate option. It then essentially rewrites your learning objectives based on the AI interpretation. It gives a suggested name for your chatbot. It creates different rules, etc. So you really just need to be very specific in your objective. In relation to um, having a chatbot that's, say, a waiter, I always put I want the answers from the waiter to be short and sweet, because a couple of them that I've created, they've taken too long to answer the question or to give a response. So if you give that sort of very clear, explicit instruction, that really helps. And then for each different option, you've got the generate AI option, or in one case, it's got generate all fields, so you can actually basically, as I said, do this really, really quickly, and then just have a play. And so what it allows you to do, you're sort of building it up, and then you've got like a preview window on the right hand side, and so you can have a play with it before you publish it. And when you publish it, you can publish it privately, or you can publish it publicly. And what that means is it's then available in the gallery. But if someone were to use your chatbot, any of the data from your students will not be shared with the person who made the original chatbot. So it seems very, very safe to use. And another feature which I really like, once you have generated your chatbot, it generates a unique link which you share with your students. And all they need to do is put in a name or put in some sort of code so you can identify who Donald Duck is or Mickey Mouse is or 0157 is, etc. And anything that they put into the chatbot and anything that the chatbot produces, a bit like Edpuzzle, you can sort of refresh the page and then you can see all the results of what they've done. So you can see all the text which has been written. So if there was any sort of issue around inappropriate language that a student was using, it would all be there as a record, as it were. And you've also got the voice feature, which I was very excited about because when it first came out, all of the options were free. So, for example, there's the knowledge file option, which meant that you could upload a PDF, for example, with information about more information about the sort of chatbot you wanted to create. Supposedly, you could put in like sort of curriculum plans and that sort of thing. I never actually played with that at the time because it went from a free to a paid option. So you still do that now, but you then have to pay for that. But what was interesting was the voice option suddenly went to the paid version. I was up in arms. So I direct messaged the Mizu Twitter account and I said, world language educators all over the world would really, really, really appreciate it if you could keep this free. And they said, thanks so much for the feedback, Joe. We're going to have a meeting tomorrow morning. We're going to have a chat about it. They did that, and bless them. The following day, they said, "Yeah, we've had a chat. And we've decided we're going to return it to the free tier, so you can have your voice. The students can use their voice to answer an interaction with the chatbot. What it does is it's voice to text. So you speak into the microphone in whichever language you want. It then turns it into text. So that will be based on the chatbot instructions. So you obviously say, I want to have a conversation with you in French. So therefore, it's expecting you to be speaking in French. It will then transcribe what you've said, and then you can then send it to the chatbot, and then the chatbot replies with text, but with a play button. So you can press the play button and then hear the model of language back. So that, folks, that's now available for free, and that's going to be free for the foreseeable future, I presume. I mean, I've not heard anything otherwise, but I got, as I said, I got very excited and wrote a post about it on my Facebook group, and I can see other people have been experimenting with it. I've been following it on Twitter. The Twitter username of Mizu is Mizu AI, and if you search that, you can see educators around the world. Not that many. I think it's still very early days, but sort of trying out workshops with teachers. I did it this week in Dublin, and I said, I'm going to show you this tool now. It's going to blow your mind. You're going to love it, and they did. And I think people are just enjoying having a play and seeing what it can do. So I'm sure you're exactly the same. You get excited about the latest thing, but I genuinely think this is a really, really nice solution for that problem. So there are other tools out there. There's one called Tutor Lily. There's one called Gleeglish, which are also aimed to be used by students using AI for conversation practice and voice control for ChatGPT that I talked about already. And of course, the actual inbuilt voice conversations option with ChatGPT, which is available in the iOS and Android app. Although in a way, it's not very intuitive. The fact that you click on the headphone icon as opposed to another icon like a microphone or what have you. But I suppose you have the microphone option for the voice dictation on your phone. But in a way, if it's voice conversations, it doesn't make sense in a way that it's a headphone icon. But that's very, very cool, and you can have very authentic sounding conversations, and you can code switch languages as well, which is brilliant. Whereas if you try to do that with voice control for ChatGPT, it gets very confused. If you try and have English and French in the same sentence, it goes, "What's going on?" So it just sort of all falls down. Whereas voice conversations, it can cope with that. So just a quick plug as well. On the 11th of March, I'm actually doing a webinar, which is going to be an hour and a half long, all about all the different options that students can do with AI for practicing conversation. And I go into the whole issue around age restrictions, the fact that obviously with ChatGPT you need to be 13 or above, you need to have parental permission, you need to have a mobile phone in order to receive the code to set up your account. So it is possible to use ChatGPT in that way, and I'm sure there'll be some students that will want to do that. Those really keen ones that just can't get enough of it. But if you're looking for um, a tool which is all those compliances I talked about, I think Mizo is a great starting point. But do have a look at Tutorlily and Gleeglish as well. And on the 11th of March, I'm running the webinar 3 times in order to, I know, crazy, 3 times in order to cater to all the different time zones. So it's going to be 10 o'clock in the morning UK time, which is essentially Asia, Australasia market, 7 o'clock in the evening, which is the UK and Europe market, and 9:30 GMT. So it's now 8:44. So in 45 minutes time, obviously it'll be 9:30. So wherever you are in the States, maybe on the East Coast, that would be okay, but maybe it would be too early for people on the West Coast should be teaching at that time. But I deliberately did that. And when I was doing my 4-part webinar series on ChatGPT, I had quite a few people coming from the States, as well as some teachers that have finished their marking and feel in the UK who feel like, oh yeah, I've done my marking for the day. I've done a whole day of teaching. I'm going to do a bit of PD from 9:30 in the evening till 11 o'clock. You do get some teachers that want to do that as well, but I deliberately decided to run the series I've been doing recently or the one-off webinars 4 different time zones because of my global appeal and the fact that there are still people who are willing to come along wherever they are in the world. And that's a question again that comes up a lot about, are you recording this, Joe, because it's going to be 4 o'clock in the morning for me, etc., etc., etc. So that's why I've deliberately tried to do 3, but I think 3 is enough. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily for anyone. 3 is definitely enough. 4 would be too many, but there we are. Hopefully that's giving you a few ideas that we can chat about now.
Yeah, for sure. 4 would be like one of those marathons. Remember those telethons they used to have, like
Yeah,
in the 80s,
yeah,
and they would go all night, and it was like you had to
yeah.
call in donations. We'll say, Joe, are you still there? And you'll still be on,
Well, I did have a couple of people saying, "What about the Middle East, Joe?
That's right.
What about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon UK time?" And, it's like no, 4.5 hours in one day is enough, I think, and all the recording, uploading, and all that, etc. Yeah, so there we
Amen.
are.
Well, and it's so cool to have so many online resources and to be able to provide webinars and, things now, especially that most of us are familiar with. We've become so familiar with webinar tools and just online meeting tools. Here we are recording, all those kind of things. Um, it's kind of a blessing and a curse because you can do anything anytime for anyone practically. And then you start thinking, oh my gosh, so which ones should I do? What times should I do, or what top that can be, because it's wide open. It can be a little overwhelming, but that's awesome. That's going to be great. And specifically in student hands is so powerful because I think there's so many conversations to be had about both sides, teachers using generative AI, students using it. But those are the concerns. We talked in episode 2 with Dr. Angela Burgess, who's here near me, here in the Metro Atlanta area. And talking about FERPA and COPPA and just all of these really real concerns that are why you can and can't use certain programs just as a teacher, but as a world language teacher, getting audio, getting video. I mean, we find these really cool websites, or we say, what did he say, Gleeglish? Okay, cool. Let me look that up. And then you get really excited about it. Maybe you even pay. You go ahead and put down, like, sign up for the monthly and this, that, and the other. And then you get to school and it's blocked on the Wi-Fi, or it's not an approved program. And it's so easy as a classroom teacher just to be excited about this time-saving tool or this chatbot. Like, this is going to be really cool. My students can go back and forth. It's going to pick up that they're talking, that they're typing in novice Spanish. So it's going to kind of accommodate that. And there's like you said, low stakes, kind of no stakes. It's not me like sitting with the grade book, like, okay, and asking questions, which I think there's sometimes a place for, right? We have to have all sorts of different interpersonal situations, but what a great tool to have. But again, then you get back to work and you realize, oh, I've already gotten excited about this and I can't even use it, which can be really frustrating. So that's really awesome to hear. I'm gonna have to look up all 3 of those because that's That's really exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, I did a training session for world language educators for Kansas public city
Mm,
schools. So that was through a contact, Diane on LinkedIn, who's the essentially the person, the advisor overseeing world language education in that area. And we sort of, as normally happens, we were going back and forth on different tools we could look at in the session. The idea was particularly focusing on speaking skills, and she obviously, spoke to the edtech people in her district, the people who oversee the use of different AI tools in particular, and they approved Mizu. They said that's absolutely fine, as long as students and teachers are using Google accounts to log in, which is one of the options, then you can use that. Whereas with Tutor Lily, with Gleeglish, they didn't want to approve it, which was fair. And I would say to everybody, you've got to look at the privacy policy, the terms of service of every single tool that you ever use to do with AI or otherwise. And as I said earlier, adhere to the AI policy of your school. And if your school doesn't have an AI policy, that needs to be written, because this is not going away. This is here to stay now, and we want to keep students safe, and we want to give them the right advice to give based on the school, based on the department, based on the local district. So we made it really clear when I was training up these world language educators in Kansas that they could use Mizu, that it had been approved. Now, I'm not saying in every single state that would be the case in the US, but it's really good to hear that. And so, if there's a tool you want to try out, of course, have a play at home, but always have a chat with the person in charge of student safety, e-safety, etc., at the school, to make sure that you're not going to get into trouble on using these sorts of tools, because um, we don't want that to happen. There's no point, myself, yourself, promoting a particular tool, and then we hear that someone has got into trouble as a result of that. So I think that it's very exciting to hear that it was approved, and hopefully there will be lots of other areas and districts that will also approve it. But just have a chat, have a conversation with the person in charge of e-safety at your school, and just show them the tool, show them how it says it's been set up for education, the different options, the compliances, and then you should be absolutely fine. And yeah, having looked at it, having played with it, having seen the reaction to people on Twitter, it just seems to be a really useful solution to that, encouraging independent practice and speaking. And we know that there are going to be some students who maybe don't want to say anything in class, but will happily spend a couple of hours maybe at home practicing their Spanish, their French, whatever language it is, and will probably come on leaps and bounds. And that's really exciting, I think.
We've got language labs here in my district, and they are super, super cool. And I had most recently the newest one, and we used it all the time just for quick interpersonal, especially in those big classes when you say, okay, now go around, talk to 5 people. Well, they talk to 2, but the further away you get, the more English there is, and the less of the language. And then you get closer and they go, oh, here she comes, kind of a thing. And they go back in the target language. And then you have to be like, en español, clase, that kind of thing. And that all of those language class tropes, right? Like just totally come out. But the language labs are nice because we can be like, boom, 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 boom. You can pair kids up really quickly. You can listen in. So you're kind of omniscient, which is cool. But this is like that. I hadn't really thought about that. But as you were saying that about a student that may be more reserved in class, but outside of class, they might go home and, like you said, really practice. And it becomes almost like that, like a language lab on the move. And what a great tool to have. I was lucky that as I was learning Spanish, I had lots of Spanish speaking friends at my school and their parents, and like a lot of people I could engage with in the community that I lived in. But if I didn't, how neat is that? I mean, there are tons of programs that and online websites and foundations and things that link you up with speakers of the language, like actual human people, which is great. But as just a student at home, maybe with your Chromebook or whatever, and you're just oh, I need to do my Spanish homework, we have a speaking test next Friday, I wish I could practice. Well, there you go. That would be really, really useful. Um, I know you and I are both really enthusiastic about like generative AI and just all the possibilities. And I'm just an enthusiastic person about technology tools usually in general, because I just anything that can save time or make things, make it that hit that kind of transformational level. It could be so disheartening just to see like a digitized worksheet, or something where someone says, "Oh, I use technology." And it's like saying you're doing kinesthetic learning, but you just did a gallery walk, and so it's just a worksheet on the wall now, and all they're doing is walking. It's like, that's not kinesthetic. But I also, again, I understand it, and I'm not judging it at all. But same thing with technology. If you are, let's say, digitizing a worksheet, and you're using that score, because it is faster than a human grading it, you're kind of stacking the papers, going home, got to pull them out, get them on the dining room table, do all that kind of thing. If you can get that information quicker, then to me that is pretty cool. So I'm always interested in hearing about tools that save people time, especially teachers, save students maybe some of those high stakes feeling situations, but give them rich opportunities to practice language, and all of that is super interesting. Do you see any, or what are the downfalls that you see to generative AI as a world language teacher? Or what downfalls might not be the right word, but what do you think we should be most careful about besides just privacy? Because I'm really glad that you mentioned that's such a perfect segue from episode 2, and an AI policy, which I think is super, super appropriate and super forward thinking. Is there anything else that you feel, even as enthusiastic as you are as well, that you feel cautious about, or that you feel like we need to kind of watch out for?
I think I like the idea of the 80-20 approach, which is the idea that you use the Gen AI to, let's say, create some content, but then you add 20% of it is your work. And I think that's the risk potentially, that students could be lazy, I suppose, or just presume that anything that the AI produces doesn't need to be checked for accuracy, for bias, and what have you. I think there's a risk of that, and we always know that there are going to be some students who just are not as enthusiastic as maybe the teacher is, who just wants to do their homework, put it into Gen AI, and then just swear blind that it's definitely their work when it clearly it isn't. So I think there's that risk of not using it to its maximum, or using it as a type of brainstorming tool, which I view it in general. I think as really it really resonated with me when you were saying about you're tired of an evening, you've done a full day teaching, you just want to get a bit of inspiration, a bit of thought about how you can use um, create a lesson plan on X, Y, and Z. I think from a student point of view, I think that I'm not naive enough to think they're not going to be using tools like ChatGPT, but I would hope to think they're going to be using it um, to promote their independence. But I think there's a risk that they won't necessarily do that. But I think in the right hands, I think it could be a very powerful way in which they could push themselves forward. And I always sort of, or recently when I was talking about this, I mean, I mentioned the idea of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, this idea of the more knowledgeable other. So in the past, I've sort of said the more knowledgeable other is like social media. Like, you ask Twitter, let's say, a question and you get an answer back. Now, the more knowledgeable other could be the AI. So regard it as, let's say, a learning buddy, and you ask us a question, um, but to be able to critically analyze whether the answer it's given is accurate or not biased, you need to have a good understanding of the topic that you're asking it. Therefore, the idea of the more knowledgeable other is that it knows a little bit more than you do. Therefore, if you ask it a question that you have no idea about, who you don't have the power to be able to critically analyze whether what it said is good or not. So I think there's that risk, that real risk, that it will well, or I hear the arguments that it says that some people will become less creative, or will be more lazy, or what have you. But to me, it's been the opposite. increased my productivity no end as a result of using AI and I think in a judicious way or just having fun trying to work out the best ways of using it. But I definitely think there's that risk. And I also think from the point of view of, fake news and generating deep fakes or creating video content and things like that. This new tool from OpenAI, Sora, Sora, that looks incredible. The quality of the videos you can produce, and once that becomes mainstream and people are having a play with it and hacking it and what have you, who knows what they're going to be able to produce. So that's a bit scary, to be honest with you. But at the same time, the genie's out of the bottle, and this is where we are, and I think we're very similar in that, in the sense of being positive. So obviously, we need to be aware of the risks and be careful that we do give the right advice and make clear that people should look at the terms of service and the privacy and the age restrictions or what have you. But at the same time, get excited and show people the things that it can do. So, for example, in relation to assessment, I think whenever I show people Quizzes AI, the Chrome extension Quizzes AI, it's just fabulous the way in which you can turn any YouTube clip or any article, web-based article, into a multiple choice set of questions really, really quickly, or the way in which you can include that YouTube clip in the actual quizzes interface into the formative assessment that you produce. I think that's fantastic, absolutely wonderful. Another thing I got excited about in relation to independent practice, which I literally just learnt about this week from Russell Stannard, who did a fantastic double header with Nick Peachy on the Language Search YouTube channel. It's not very annoyingly, I get very frustrated about these sorts of things because I just want it now straight away. So I watched it live and I've written about it in my Facebook group, but they've done a sneak peek, which is about a minute long, but they're not going to release the full 2-hour video until I think a couple of weeks time. But when it's there on the Language Search website, YouTube channel, I mean, I would really recommend watching it because they shared some fantastic tips. And one of the things which I'd never heard about before, which I'm sure you know yourself, Meredith, but in Google Translate, you've got the star icon in Google Translate. So you put your term in, and it can detect the language, etc., and then it will then translate it based on the language that you've chosen. But if you click on the star, you can create your own phrase book. And then that phrase book, what Russell was suggesting was that you just then copy all the items in the phrase book and put it into a screen reader like Natural Reader using AI, and it will then read it back to you with a good model of pronunciation. There's also, with Helper Bird, you have Immersive Reader built in. So if people don't know what Immersive Reader is, that's from Microsoft, but it's also available in Chrome extensions like Helper Bird. And in my opinion, the quality of the voice, it sounds more authentic with Helper Bird Immersive Reader as opposed to with Natural Reader. But the nice thing about Natural Reader is it works on all devices, which is great. So I just thought that was a really interesting idea of making your own customized phrase book and then having it read back to you by putting it into a tool like Natural Reader. So from the point of view of, again, promoting independence for those shy students at home that can't get enough of it, for those people that don't know that that's possible. And as I said, I didn't know until a couple of days ago that was possible, but I just thought that was a really exciting idea. So maybe my enthusiasm just spills over, and I like to focus on that. But I do recognize the risks, and those are real. And also this sort of maybe teachers getting burnt out by, or people who are sort of PD junkies, as it were, who just can't get enough of this sort of stuff. I mean, if you go onto Eventbrite, you do a search for ChatGPT or AI, you've got like 500 hits to not that I've worked. Just to clarify, I haven't worked through all 500 hits, but maybe I've gone through a couple of pages and attended a few, free webinars, and some of these webinars people are charging like a couple of $100 for them, and you just and some of them are free, and you sort of that's a challenge as well, working out what's worth your time. That's why, for example, there's a really nice Chrome extension that works with YouTube, which is YouTube Summary with ChatGPT and Claude, I think it is. It's got like a sort of a green and red little icon, on it, and that's just really useful for because you can see a video clip. It might be an hour long, etc. And you think, do I want to spend some time watching that? You click on the summary option, and it will just give you 5 bullet points based on the transcript. So it has to have a transcript for it to work. And based on that, you could then make an educated guess whether it's worth your time or not. But I think following people like myself, like yourself, like Maureen, etc., that's the way to go. I think just by doing that, you're probably going to pick up more rather than randomly searching through YouTube or Eventbrite. So another thing I'd recommend people do is that curate people to follow in a list. So I've got a world language educators list which I've put together, which has probably got about, I don't know, 100 people on it, yourself included, Meredith. And so it means that when I have a moment when I am not looking at the language teachers from the UK and from Ireland on the MFL Twitterers list, which I manage as well, which has got nearly 5,000 members. I have a break and see what's happening stateside, and I always get inspired by the people on that list, like the people I mentioned already, and also obviously Noemi Rodriguez as well, who's doing fantastic work, and yeah, just getting a different perspective. People are looking about the same things, but they're not doing it in the same way, and it's just each list, each group of people, they have a different tone. They talk about different things, and yeah, I just find that really exciting. So it's just as with anything to do with ed tech, it's people trying to find out what are the best tools, what's the cream of the crop, and there's so many things out there. But I think that certainly at the moment there are some surefire winners, such as Quizzes AI, such as Diffit. Those sorts of tools always goes down well, and I think Mizu is just going to go right up there at the top there with those as well. Once people have had more of a time to have a play, and hopefully this podcast will facilitate lots of explorations around Mizu for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think it comes down to trust. Like what you're saying
Yes,
is it
yes.
sounds, my colleague always says, if you sign into something using, like you mentioned, the Google button, the single sign on, he's like, okay, Google's a name that you trust. Whoops, I said the magic word and then it turned on and it just activated.
This is live,
That's
folks.
right.
This is live.
This is
Yeah,
live.
that's
Just
not
when
a
we
blooper. That's
think.
going to stay in. Yeah.
Just when we think the robots aren't listening. Listen, my ChatGPT queries always say please and thank you. And because when it's us against them, no, I'm just kidding. I want them to remember she was polite, right? When the robots take
Oh,
over.
actually, just on that point, sorry to butt in, but I attended an amazing webinar from Linguiscope from Richard West Soley, who's a linguist, a real polyglot, acclaimed polyglot. And one thing that he said, his whole presentation was about ChatGPT and what you can do with it from the point of view of an individual language learner, which I just thought was fascinating. He said that actually it's not a good idea to say please and thank you, which really blew my mind because I've always been saying please and thank you. Because I always say as a joke, I suppose you never know who's listening. But he was saying that actually, if you use terms like please, it's more likely, or it can introduce sort of an element of doubt in ChatGPT on what it is that it wants to, what it needs to create. In fact, if it's okay, I'd literally like
Please.
to read what he wrote because it's really interesting. So I've written this in incredibly detailed summary about the presentation, and here we are. Here we are. So I will read verbatim what he said because it's fascinating. So he said, um, yeah, right. Avoid saying please, as this increases likelihood of refusal. And then he goes on to say the rationale Richard shared for avoiding saying please when prompting an AI assistant was particularly interesting. There we are. He explained that essentially, since AI tools like ChatGPT generate responses by predicting the statistically, that's quite difficult to say, statistically most likely, the statistically most likely text a human would produce in that conversation context, saying please actually increases the probability that the response would be a refusal or pushback. By framing our prompt politely as a request or favor, we add a degree of optionality or choice not to comply on the AI's part. which makes it sound like a a cyborg or whatever.
Right.
So the AI could respond by refusing our instructions, just as a human may potentially decline a polite request. So in other words, if you give direct commands
Mm,
without saying please and thank you, that's more likely to produce a better result. That's what Richard said. So
fascinating.
he'd be another great person to have on the podcast, actually. But there we
Yes.
are.
That is so
That's
interesting. Well, politeness is canceled when I'm on ChatGPT. That is so interesting. But that makes sense. Like when you said optionality, that's exactly what I was thinking. Is I was like, you're right. It sounds like it's an option, right? Like, please
yeah.
do this. No, no, thank you. Or
But
wow,
it's also the core of it is knowing how the LLM
yeah,
works, and which obviously because that's sort of Richard's background as well as being a linguist. So I really take on board what he's saying, and he's worked out because that's how LLMs work. That's why he feels that saying please is not actually necessarily a good idea. So yeah, anyway. So I interrupted you, but I just wanted to share that nugget because it was
no,
fascinating.
not at all. That was great. Yeah, that is super, super interesting. And now I'm thinking like, I need to look him up right away because that is really, really interesting. Well, and the collaboration is just something that's just really great with everything. In my opinion, pretty much it's always positive to collaborate with other people. And that is so important because, like you said, getting other perspectives with anything, if you're teaching vocabulary or grammar, walking down the hall, as Thomas Sauer says, the best PD is down the hall. Like, walk down the hall, collaborate with people, ask somebody. We're never alone in this profession that can many times, though you're surrounded by people, feel very lonely. But that is so key, especially if something is like mind blowing and you're like, how is anybody keeping track of all these sites? I heard of this tweet or I heard of ChatGPT, but I don't even know where to start. I think it sounds like what you're saying is some of those core things that we already hold kind of as values are important to remember when it comes to AI, like that trust. My colleague says, it's almost like when you do single sign on or when you're creating an account, you're kind of giving away the keys to your house. So, do you trust Microsoft? Do you trust Google? Those are big names. Sure, but if it's just like Bob's AI, or whatever, you're like, maybe a little less, right? So it's something definitely to consider is that trust piece and then that collaboration piece, like asking people, seeking other perspectives, going, hey, have you tried it? What do you think? What do you mentioned too before, obviously the privacy, and that's also just classically, fundamentally something that's super important to keep in mind, which is easy to forget. It shouldn't be. It's kind of like copyright, for when even 10, 15 years ago, when it was a little bit easier to Google search something or purchase something on, let's say, a paid website, or you go to a conference and someone gave you like the handout, the actual copy, and you went, thank you so much. Then you went home and that was the worksheet that you just worked from then on. That was your original copy, and you might have had some handwritten notes, and then or
Those
directions.
are the
Yeah,
days.
and then you
Yeah.
copied those too, so students got that. Or you just retyped it and whatever. It's a little, you could kind of live in your own little bubble and not credit people or not look up copyright stuff or not do those safety things that you mentioned, which are just no longer really something we should be ignoring. You know what I mean? We're so connected, we're so
Yeah.
globalized, like if you were to buy something, I've had so many conversations with friends who are vendors, and they'll be sitting in a presentation while someone's presenting something of theirs from, let's say, Teachers Pay Teachers, using their thing. Their name is nowhere to be found. And so we're just in like this super connected, globalized place now where there's just not really an excuse to ignore things like copyright and trademarks and privacy. And I was very candid on episode 2 where I was like, oh yeah, like early 2000, again, I'm thinking like 2007, 2008, you're just Googling for an image. You have your vocab list. You're just looking for a salad that has, and you're looking at your vocab list like, I need a clip art so I can put on this PowerPoint of a salad and lettuce and tomato, and let me just get this one from the internet. And we did, I just never really thought much about that. But man, that ship has sailed, I think, in a really good way, because I think we're more informed now and we're more conscious of things. Or at least I think we should be. Maybe that's judgy, but I know I am for sure. And now supporting technology at my school, I'm like, oh, holy cow. This is like, this is serious. Like you said, like earlier, like different, what was the word you used? I can't remember. Violation. Like these are violations. This needs to be,
Yeah,
these students might be under 13. They can't be signing up for, this, that, and
exactly.
the other.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, it sounds like some of those, we just have to vet certain things like we would anything else, and just do those things um that we've known to be true of, like, oh, is this real? Let me check, because like you said, there are powerful things that, like deep fakes and just all this kind of scary stuff, where we might see a politician saying something, made with a generative AI video, and they didn't actually say that, but it sounds just like them, and that can be really scary for people, really disconcerting. But checking sources and going, does that sound like something that person would say? And just those, I don't know, kind of natural things that I hope we haven't lost. I don't know. I don't think we have. Um, is really, really important to keep in mind.
but I also think in relation to that idea of finding an image on the internet, etc., which obviously we should always respect copyright, and we should use Creative Commons licensed images as much as possible, of course. But I also think it's very exciting to explore the text to image AI tools, like with Padlet. You've got the I can't draw option in Padlet. You've got the in Microsoft Designer now. You've got a image generator tool. Although interestingly, it doesn't seem to allow you to sign up with a school Microsoft account, which is something I discovered this week, which was really annoying. So I've been able to use it using my live.co.uk account, which I only use for signing up for things basically. But you can't use your Microsoft School account. And then
Darn.
there's Adobe Firefly, which is also brilliant. And the way in which one of the features I particularly like in that is called generative fill. So you can get a picture generated by putting in your text prompt, and then you can click on the edit option, click on generative fill, and that then turns your cursor into a type of sort of paintbrush. You then paint over a certain area, which gives it that sort of transparent background, and then you write in your prompt whatever it is you want to add. So to give an example, when I'm demonstrating this, I normally write the same prompt each time, which is an elephant playing chess in the rain. I don't know why, but I've just sort of came up with this idea, and so I can see each tool has a slightly different style. So anyway, I did this with the Adobe Firefly, and then using the generative fill option, I wrote a large red balloon, and then in the background of this lovely picture with the elephant playing chess in the rain, suddenly a nice balloon appeared. So I was thinking that would be one fantastic for generating bespoke images, maybe based on the way in which there are some words in one language which sound like a word in another language which have nothing to do with each other. You could easily create an image with the two words combined as a memory trigger to help you remember something, which would for languages, which would be amazing. The way in which you can, otherwise you'd have to commission an artist to make something like that,
Right.
which obviously no one's going to do. But you could use an AI tool to do that, or you could do a really simple spot the difference activity. You could have one core image, and then using that generative fill idea, you could then add different elements or move or there's other AI tools. There's one called Magic Eraser from Magic Studio, which allows you to literally paint over a certain item. I normally find this picture on the with Storyboard that there's the photos for class element, which used to be a standalone website, but now which is it's always been run by Storyboard that, but they've now incorporated that in their main um, website. I normally find this picture that I normally use with a beach with a cocktail on the beach. And then using Magic Eraser in Magic Studio, I just basically paint over the cocktail, and as if by magic, it's disappeared. The cocktail's gone. So again, you could use that for a type of Kim's game type of activity
Mhm.
or spot the difference, whereby you are removing different elements of a picture, and then the students have to say to you in the target language what are the missing elements. And this is nothing new. Like 20 years ago, at least, I wouldn't, well, 20 years ago, let's say, I used to do this sort of thing with an overhead projector. and removing objects from an overhead projector and what have you. You're probably
No, not
not
at
old
all.
enough
I
to
was gonna say I
remember
used
those
to have
things.
transparencies, the side by sides when I first started
Well, there we
teaching,
are.
where it was
There we are.
like,
So it's
yeah,
the
what's
same
the
idea.
difference? Yeah.
It's the same idea. It's just
Mhm.
using AI to create something that's more bespoke. So I think those sorts of positive ways of using AI to generate text, and likewise with videos, you could easily create some nice videos for maybe describing, I don't know, action verbs, for example, or setting a scene or this sort of thing. I think that's really, really, really exciting as well. So what I love about reading tweets from people like yourself, Maureen, Naomi, etc., is I get inspired. You know, I mean, I know for a fact that you spoke at Neckful, was it a
Yeah.
couple of days
Yeah, I
ago?
did.
I looked at both your presentations. Just sometimes a bit like sort of you're playing a bit matching, as in
Mhm.
sort of like, oh, I know that one, I know that one. Oh, that's a new one.
Right.
I know that one. Oh, that's a new one. And I always learn things from people like yourself, and I love that collaborative nature,
Mhm.
the way in which people share things. So, yeah, there's still a great deal to get excited about, I think.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Well, one of my favorite people too to see present at GATC, for example, or
Mm.
FETC here in the States, is Matt Miller, and he talks a lot about
Yeah,
AI,
he's
and he's
amazing. Yeah,
amazing. He's amazing.
and
Um,
former Spanish teacher, which maybe not
yes,
everyone knows.
and
Yeah, yeah.
I think again, current Spanish. I think he might be teaching Spanish
That's
10
right. Yeah, he
currently.
went back to the
I
classroom. Yeah,
think,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
which is so cool. And his blog is great, and he's just great. A couple of things that I have found really eye-opening, and that I know others have too, because I've then, with credit, of course, used his graphic and everything, um, is like you just mentioned, that collaboration. So if we find something, let's say on Twitter with, hashtag MFL or hashtag LangChat, or all those kind of different ways that we can kind of curate resources and collaborate.
Yeah,
What if a student's using generative AI, or to do something, and they're asking it as, finding information or finding a source for something? Matt Miller, in one of his sessions at GATC, said, okay, what if I said you couldn't collaborate with colleagues anymore? Is that cheating? We say that students using AI, no, you need to do it all on your own, you need to do it just by yourself and no outside sources or whatever. Okay, well, then you don't get to ask the teacher down the hall. You don't get to collaborate with anybody. That's
no.
right. No, I beg. I'm like, no, 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 that would be terrible. And it would be terrible for so many people, because there's such great opportunities in person, online, through reading, through listening. I mean, here we are, right? Like, to collaborate and to have conversations about things that are important to us. And I would never think that was cheating. Like, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have 11 tools that you've mentioned that I have not played with yet. And I have been circling in really big print, because I want to go explore them. So is that, if I go find them and then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool and I can use it, like, is that cheating? And I think that's a lot of the concern with it. Anytime we take shortcuts, I don't know, we've made it's an interesting thing where we like shortcuts. Like, I don't think I'm supposed to be out in the creek behind my house washing my clothes on a rock. I'm not like loading the washing machine going like, oh, it's cheating. Like, I got some help, right? Or the dishwasher. But then we have this funny line where it's like, but not this thing. I know a few years ago, and I talked about this on our flag webinar series. Gosh, 3 years ago this spring, right now, where early novice teacher and teaching novice Spanish me would have, presentations, and I would say, okay, you're gonna, all present, which is always an adventure. You're all going to present, one at a time in front of the class, no notes, no note card, no slides. But yet I come into every lesson with slides, handouts, manipulatives. You know what I mean? You have everything ready. And it's like, why did I think that was kind of a realistic portrayal of what people would have to do? Because kids, what are they doing? They're up there like, trying to remember. And now it just turns into a game of como se dice, or like, where with the teacher back and forth. So I think it's a generative AI is really opening up conversations that I know we've been having as world language teachers, but it's taking them in this really interesting direction, because I think we should constantly be reflecting on like what is teaching, or what is not what is teaching, well, that too, but what is cheating, what is uh, any of these real life scenarios, because as language teachers we're also always trying to predict like situations that students will be in trying to use the language. Who will they be talking to? We're trying to equip them all the time when we really can't predict at all if and where and when they'll use the language in the future. So we're trying to make those interactions with us as realistic as possible. But now with all these different tools to practice and to generate and just to organize and to create, and just so many things can be done, that I know it can feel like, well, gosh, what am I even doing anymore? Is this going to replace teachers? And I think the answer to that is clearly no. Just like the
No,
internet didn't, just like
it's not.
nothing that we've ever thought was going to be scary. But do you have, as we wrap up here, and this has been so great, so I really appreciate you and your time.
Welcome.
Is
I appreciate
there
you asking me. It's
Absolutely.
been
I
great
mean, the first one I
conversation.
thought of, I was like, Joe Dale, we got to get him
Oh,
on there. Um, is there any kind of, I don't know, overall advice, besides you've already given us such great pieces of wisdom, but any kind of just summarizing advice that you have for world language teachers, no matter their approach, or just when it comes to generative AI in general?
well, in relation to Matt Miller, I remember seeing a really nice description that he was giving around like the dichotomy of students using or not using AI. So on the one end of the dichotomy will be students are using AI without thinking about it. Basically,
Hmm.
they're just using it. They're asking a prompt. They're getting a response. They're giving it in as the homework, as it were. On the other hand, at the end of the dichotomy, the other extreme, they're not using it at all. They're ignoring it. They're just doing their own work and they're not using it as a brainstorming tool, etc. And you've got different levels. I think you've had about 5 different levels. Um, you've probably seen it yourself,
Yeah,
Meredith,
I'm
but
thinking, is it the blue and
and
green one? It's kind of like arrows and like a
exactly.
spectrum kind of. Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. And he was sort of suggesting that sort of area around the middle, maybe that's the way to go. In other words, you're using it maybe for a bit of brainstorming, and then based on what it's produced, you're then rewriting it, you're adding your own voice, those sorts of things. I think those sorts of ethical issues around how much are you using it, and it's essentially the AI that's doing it, or how much are you adding your own voice to it? How much are you tweaking it, changing it? Are you using it maybe just to brainstorm some ideas to get started? I think that's a really interesting debate, and I think that um, the sorts of teachers who have been promoting the use of AI, they've been doing some clever things, I think, such as asking the AI to, for example, create a text around a certain grammar point, and maybe it's not done a very good job, and just shown it to the students, and then they can then work out themselves, well, that's not very good, or that's wrong, or that's not correct, etc. So showing them with a practical example that AI is not infallible, it does hallucinate. And I think the more you use it as a student or as a teacher, um, with parental permission, all those things I've talked about already, um, as well included, that students and teachers, I'm sure, get a feel for the things it does well. And so I think as a sort of a finishing piece of advice, I would suggest start off by looking at, let's say, a tool like ChatGPT or Claude or those sorts of large language models, or Google Gemini, and have a play, have a go at creating different types of ideas, have a go at creating a lesson plan. There might be a lot of the lesson plan it makes that you don't like, but there might be one thing that you like, and then maybe say, okay, make me a worksheet based on that particular idea in that particular lesson plan. Um, get it to create different types of text, give it a topic, say what language you want, say the age group of the students, um, say the different parameters around, for example, I don't know, describing a disastrous weekend, talk about who you went on holiday with, or what you did, or what's your favorite hobby, etc. So different parameters within that text, see how much of a good job it does. Those sorts of things. I think I think don't be scared, but at the same time, don't overwhelm yourself. Don't don't be too hard on yourself. Follow people like myself, yourself, Maureen, Naomi, etc. Maybe consider joining my Facebook group. You can be a lurker. You can lurk and learn. You don't have to say anything. You can just sit and read a few posts, maybe while you're having a cup of coffee. Once a day, have 10 minutes, read one post, leave a comment if you're feeling brave enough, try something out, go from there. Softly approach, and reach out for help if you need it. And there'll be people who are more than happy to help and support. That's what I would say. I mean, but I've been saying that sort of thing for years. It's just the same thing. It's just with AI, it's moving so quickly, and the fact that you yourself, you're very, very techno savvy, and yet there are 11 tools now you've not heard about. So you've got a whole playground now to play with, and exactly. Um, and so having, and likewise, I'll be picking up things from yourself. So it's all about the sharing. It's all about finding out what's out there, pushing the envelope, but always looking at it through a world language education lens, as it were, and trying to work out the best way in which we can make everyone's lives better. That's what it's all about, from the point of view of the teacher point of view and from the student, as long as we make sure that anything we suggest is appropriate and safe to use, because we don't want anyone to get into trouble.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the power of lurk and learn is really, really underrated too. I think people feel the
Yeah.
pressure if I join a group, like, because your Facebook group is phenomenal. So like if I join a group, am I going to have to say anything? It's like getting called on at a meeting. Even as adults, we go, don't say my name, don't call on me. And yeah, like these online communities can be great. You can have absolutely zero identifying information on your profile itself, even if you're not into social media. Get a Twitter account, follow people, don't have any follow you, don't worry about a profile picture. You know what I mean? Like you can really effectively kind of hover and lurk and learn. And it's again, just goes back to, like you said, like we've been doing and saying for a long time, but now it's getting and staying important because so many things are moving so quickly that it can feel like, wait a minute, am I missing out? And I don't think we
And one
are.
person can't know everything. That's the thing, isn't it? One
Mhm.
person cannot know, because there's so many things
No.
out there. That's why collaborating is
Mhm.
so important, I think.
One of my favorite colleagues at another school will say, because I'm just amazed by all the things she knows. So I ask her a billion questions. She opened the door, and that's her fault,
Love it.
right? Like, shouldn't have been so approachable. And so when I ask her 1,000 things all the time, I'm like, how do you know this? How do you know so much? And she said, well, I didn't until I did, and that's kind of one of my favorite things is she's just got a really healthy, well-rounded, and very humble, because she does know everything, but really humble outlook on her own learning, where she's like, all of us in this, know something that the other person doesn't. So you didn't know it until you did. And that's everybody with everything, which I think is cool. Um, I will say too, I've had colleagues just really, really upset about, different writing tools and that kind of thing. And I've said to them, are you ascribing some kind of like should onto yourself? Like you should have them type responses, for example, in Spanish class, or they should be responding in a Google document, and then they're printing it, and it's kind of more of an essay at that point. And why aren't you just having them write on paper if you're so upset, about this? And she was like, oh, like, so I think you're exactly right, where this had been a person who always did, lots of free writes and used the numbered writing page, which I adore, and all of those things to give students this really rich feedback. But because she was kind of, you know, like I need to, I'm not taking advantage of the technology if I'm not having them type, their writings and all those kind of things. It was making her so just feel so like all over the place, because she felt like she knew students were using tools they shouldn't be, even though, you try to do the things. Again, it's like chips, who can stop, right? It's like that's it. And so I totally get it. And they're kids, they're children. Their willpower is going to be different. Their frontal lobe is still frontal lobing, right? So they're just like, oh, this is pretty cool. and they're going to use all the things. And I said, why don't you just go back to writing on paper? I mean, you loved it. It was great feedback. She gives beautiful written feedback and all these kind of things. So I think we overthink it, is why I say all that sometimes, is we hear all these tools and you think, I should be using this. I should be using this. I really need to catch up. I'm so behind. And I caution against that too, because good teaching is good teaching in a lot of ways. So I'm really appreciating your message there too, of like, ask people, explore, click around, play around. I'm totally going to quote that, like, have a play, just fiddle around in it, and take away that fear and really explore it and see what it's got. If it's not for you, great. Say, well, good for them, not for me, and move on. But I think we've, just like anything, right? We've been doing that for textbooks for years. Or, a colleague leaves a worksheet on the copy machine and you go, oh, what is, oh, and you might not really, or you might say, oh, this is great. Hey, can I have a copy of this? So I think we evaluate things all the time, and this seems to be no different, right?
I think so. I think it's just a question of um, deciding on, based on your context,
Mm,
what you can cope with
yeah,
in bandwidth, and then not exceeding that. I think that's a really important point in relation to
hmm,
being kind on yourself, mental health issues. I think that it is easy to
yeah,
get overwhelmed. I think that um, sharing a few ideas, problem solving, having a chat with a colleague, either face to face or virtually, is a great way of, again, going back to the word
hmm,
demystifying this whole area and finding a practical and workable way forward.
yeah.
I think that's a really nice way to finish. I
I think
think
so
that
too.
that's what it's all about. You don't have to be like us if you're not into that sort of thing. I know that this whole point of this sort of chat, in a way, is to share the latest tools as
Hmm.
well, because we enjoy doing that. That's why we want to do this, have this sort of conversation. But at the same time, we don't want to scare people and overwhelm them.
Yeah,
I think that's a nice way to finish,
I
maybe.
think so too. I think that word forward too is just move forward. As long as you just keep moving forward, move at your own pace. Thank you so much, Joe, for your time. Like, I know you're busy and I know you were just traveling, so I really super appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure. We've never met each other face to face, everyone,
Oh,
by the way, but
one of these
I feel
days.
a number of collaborations over the years, and
Yeah.
obviously I would absolutely love to meet you face to
Wouldn't
face.
that be fun?
But
The number
it's
of
been
times
great.
I've Googled Isle of Wight, I'm telling you, and I've been like, okay, will we be anywhere? No, it's still a
You've
few
always been
hours
welcome.
away.
Hey, yeah, for sure,
Oh
for
man.
sure.
Well, thank you so
No,
much.
it's great fun. It's great fun to do, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
No worries. And thanks everybody for listening.